it's not September. I am here on March 17th with, say your name?
Ryan Tooney.
Ryan Tooney, who is currently acting as the king of the Kingdom of Ardesca within the Empire of Medieval Pursuits. And he's here to talk to me about Nordic identity and living history. And so, how do you integrate your Nordic identity into your living history activities?
Sure. So I originally started in the very traditional sense of the Viking reenactment because that's the easiest place to go to. But found when I moved to the Northwest, there were a lot of Vikings here, and I wanted to try something different. So I decided I wanted to get a little later period for armor and kind of more of a knightly persona. So I did some research and I found the Normans in the north of France, which are descended from Viking settlers. I believe Rollo, right? I think? Yes. And so following the history of what the Normans did throughout Europe, still kind of a lot of that Viking-esque idea, except rather than raiding and pillaging, it was conquering and setting up new kingdoms. So you'd have William that came over to England, and then the Normans also took over Sicily and parts of the Middle East, and really exported themselves as mercenaries that were very, very competent compared to a lot of the military powers of the time. My personal persona that I recreate are the Norman invaders of Ireland. So once England kind of all became under the same rule and a bunch of second sons were getting kind of bored not having any land and whatnot, they hopped over to Ireland, and it was with Strongbow, and they invaded kind of the southern part of Ireland, started to set up much more feudal style system where much of the Irish there were still very clan and tribal based. And then my wife's persona being Irish, that melded really easily together to still kind of have some nods to Scandinavian history, but a little bit removed, but I could still kind of have that aspect to my persona.
So you talked about your wife. Is your wife of Irish descent,
She
or
is.
is she also like kind of a mix?
It's pretty mixed, but it's mostly Irish, English, and Scottish, so it's all the islands there. So she identifies much more with her Irish side of the family. And we have some fun with that because the Irish and the Norman lords kind of got along. We found some pretty interesting articles that we went into where the Irish noblewomen would marry into the Norman families and then would report back to the clans on where supplies were going or what this was doing, so that the clans that were still kind of warring with the Normans could take advantage of that information. So we have some fun with that aspect of it where we're married, but perhaps it's contentious at times. It makes our reenactment kind of fun.
That's awesome. So you said you kind of twisted it so that you could be Norman and still kind of express some of your Scandinavian identity. Is there other stuff you do outside your living history activities that you do to kind of embrace your Norwegianness, so to speak?
Make a lot of jokes about lutefisk. No, it's the thing at every family reunion back in Minnesota. Everyone brings up the lutefisk, and I can't stand it, but that's always. Not really specifically that I can think of. I'm always I love even though I don't portray the Viking in my living history, I still like the round shields, the costume, the very distinct look that's from that region. So it is also on our list of places to visit. We hit Ireland for our 10th anniversary with the wife, so I think 20 is going to be Norway, I think is the plan.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And it was really my dad's side of the family that's the Norwegian comes from. He was 100% Norwegian, so they were his father immigrated, or was his grandfather? I think his grandfather immigrated, and then his dad married a Norwegian girl, so it was.
So they kept it in the family.
They kept it very much in the family. So. And then my mom is Swedish and German, so the Swedish is there and the German we just kind of like, well, okay, that's close enough.
Well, that's cool.
I guess the only other thing is whenever my best joke from the family reunions is, what does Norway have that Sweden does, or what does Sweden have that Norway doesn't? And the answer is good neighbors. So that's my other everyday Scandi humor.
That's fabulous. And so is there anything you're doing, because you have kids, so is there anything you're doing to kind of help pass on that heritage a bit?
Well, they participate in the reenactment part of it pretty well. They don't quite have the enjoyment of history of it. They just like to come hang out at this point. The Irish part, I think the wife definitely imparts a lot more of the Irish than I do the Norwegian in the family. But even that's kind of interesting because the Normans in Ireland, by the third generation, I think, the second or third generation of the Normans that settled there, it was said they became more Irish than the Irish because they started like adopting all of the Irish cultural things, and they started being like, yeah, we're Irish, and the native Irish were like, okay, bring it down a notch. So there was that. And then unfortunately, as you get much later in period, you start to get the famine stuff, and that kind of changes. But the medieval Norman-Irish relationship was much more, after the initial kind of battling, was much more copacetic. So yeah.
And so you said your grandparents, you think, that immigrated over?
Yeah, I think it was might be my great-grandparents were the initial immigrants from Norway.
That's cool. And do you know anything about where, or is it just Norway?
I couldn't tell you the town area, but I'm told it was much more up in the kind of hill mountainous region of the. There's a valley there, so I guess that they came from, is what I was told. I haven't done my due diligence on researching all of that. One of my half-brothers has all of the genealogy done, so I just need to ask him for it, and I can
That's
have
fabulous.
those answers. But
so it's something that's still kind of evolving in your generation in the family then.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
And so
I would say the unfortunate thing is most of my grandmother on my dad's side has passed, and the aunts and uncles, so my aunts and uncles are all getting to that age where they're passing, and all of the cousins have spread out so much we don't really have that cohesion anymore because we're all over the country. So I would say the family reunions and all of that have definitely diminished since certain aspects, certain members of the family have passed on. That focus on that has been lost, unfortunately.
So do you think that part of the your family like spreading out is diminishing part of your identity as a Scandinavian family?
Very much so. Yeah, because I mean it's easy to, when you all get together and so someone's telling you stories of this is where Grandpa came in the old country and these are some this and that, when those were cool, but when none of us are within 3 hours of each other anymore, brothers or cousins, it's hard to have that community sense anymore. I get into it simply from the history side of it, thankfully, but yeah, I could definitely say to my two older half-brothers, they're like, yeah, I guess we're Norwegian, they kind of just do their thing.
And so you said that you use your living history as a way to embrace and kind of reconnect to your heritage.
Yeah.
And so is there anything you can expand on that a bit?
Well, like I said, the initial reason for where I went was to keep something that had some roots in Scandinavia and Norway, but wasn't necessarily portraying something from there. I still love it when I can find something interesting about Norway or Iceland or Denmark or Sweden and kind of research it and know about it. But for now, as a way to go a different route in my reenactment, but still give a nod to it and still have that little bit of a tie-in. One of the favorite, I don't have it on right now, but it's a modified Odin shield, so it's a Christianized version of it. So it still has the cross in it, but it has the old kind of. They snuck in some old stuff with it, and so that was a gift that I like to think in my persona was kept from someone that kept the original faith, but obviously living in France, converted, but still wanted to have a little bit of a nod to it. So I kind of treat that particular piece of my getup as a kind of hidden little nod back to an older time.
That's cool. That's really cool. And so,
what else you got?
So, like, do you guys do any activities outside of your living history stuff, like festivals or?
Honestly, this takes up most of my time. We tend to we go to like the Arlington Viking Fest, and we've mainly done that just to be some fighting for the crowd. This year, I actually intend to have a Norman camp set up and talk about what the Vikings did as they moved to, or what, I know it's always Vikings to the populace,
Yeah.
but to people, what Scandinavian cultures did once they weren't in Scandinavia, and what their influence was throughout Europe. Because while it might be the Normans or the Franks, they were so drastically, at least on the military side of things, influenced by Normandy and those regions of France. And they took over England, they controlled Ireland, they ran Sicily. Most of the original Crusader states were from Norman descendants. You had areas of Italy that were conquered and run by the Normans. They very much kept that expand outward idea, but rather than going back home, they just set up shop.
So speaking of that expand outward idea, what do you think of some of the Vikings came to Minnesota, given that you have family from there?
You mean like in the? We might have posted that.
Signs that we can give our guys if all the monsters have been caught, so they're not just fucking out in the woods getting tired.
Yeah, there probably should be. Vigo, is he around? Because he's kind
I
of.
don't see him.
God damn it! All right, how many monsters do we have in?
I know we have 3.
All right, let me see what we've got. We'll have to come back to this.
No,